You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What if the key to transformation isn't found in thought, but in the hidden frequencies that shape our very being? Stay tuned for today's exploration. This episode contains adult subject matter, and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we sit with the idea that healing can move at the speed of resonance. Rather than pushing through the mind or retelling the same stories, we begin to notice how the body speaks through sensation, tension, and subtle shifts of energy. Sam Kukathas is the creator of Neuro-Resonance Optimisation, a transformational vocal resonance technology that clears deep energetic patterns and restores coherence at the nervous system level. He works privately with some of the world's most visionary leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, and change makers, supporting them to collapse the time between vision and embodied results. Sam is the founder of Resonance OS, a conscious technology platform designed to unlock human potential, restoring balance in just 9 minutes a day and activating peak performance in 15 minutes or less. His energetic transmissions have been recognized by spiritual leaders like Reverend Michael B. Beckwith for their profound impact on human consciousness. Let's meet Sam Kukathas. Hi, Sam. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because healing at the speed of resonance is a fascinating topic for our episode today. I can't wait to find out more, and I'm sure our listeners are very curious already. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Petra. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, pleasure is all mine. And I feel that we have a lot to talk about today as far as a little bit of an explanation for our listeners and also diving into what that actually means. I feel there's so many layers to healing at the speed of resonance that let's get started with a bit about yourself maybe. And, maybe the parts of your journey or your story that connect to what you do today. And also let our listeners know a little bit about what it is that you do today so they can get to know you.
Sure. So the journey has been in a number of stages, as tends to be the case. So I wrote about the human condition for 20 years, but the first part of that journey was as a philosopher. And it was from a philosopher who was a typical philosopher, like I was the glass half full kind of guy, looking at all the fallibilities and quite pessimistic about human nature because I was looking at the human condition to understand law and politics. And then in 2017, I didn't get my doctorate. And I was really already in a space where my mental health was terrible. And by that point, I really didn't like myself. And I would have described myself back then as someone who had depression, had anxiety. And it wasn't until I stepped into personal development that I started to see that was a story that I had made up, that wasn't actually the truth of the matter. I'd been experiencing things which led me like suicidal ideation, but it wasn't who I was as an actual expression. It was an identity I'd created for myself. So I started to re-engineer and reverse engineer who it is that I thought I was. And that was the start of actually starting to see the light, essentially, and becoming more of like a possibilitarian. But then as we kind of went along, I shifted from the world of like transformative leadership, coaching into the somatic world, which is more where I've come now. And the opening for me came through a psychedelic journey. And I wasn't super keen about doing psychedelics. I didn't have much of an understanding of them. What I did understand, I was a little bit scared of. But someone I trusted essentially invited me into a journey, a guided journey, where you wrote like 2 pages of intentions down. Well, that's what I wrote down around psilocybin and MDMA. So the MDMA is a heart opener, and the psilocybin to really open up the field of expanse. And what really happened for me was basically everything that I had to clear came up and cleared very quickly. And then from there, I just got into this space of creation. And in that space of creation, there were different figures who were well known in the world who came through in my awareness, and I started coaching them in that journey. So I was coaching the Prime Minister of England in my journey, and that was correlate with the work that I was already planning to do around the transformation of politics. And then other figures like Werner Erhard, Landmark, all these other companies came through, and I was just talking to them about what didn't work necessarily about their being or what was operating in the world. And then there was a business coach / energy healer who came in, and I'd done some of his coaching programs. I wasn't a massive fan of them. And essentially, I started to talk to him about integrity. And the message that came through a little bit later was essentially, Sam, you're here to heal all the bullshit in the world. And that was a thing where you could take it like, oh, okay, like that was a nice journey and experience and a cool way of looking at the world. Or it's like, what is it actually being expressed here, which is for me to actually do something with? And I took it as, okay, maybe I'm a healer. And so when literally like a week later, I got an email from the same person who showed up in the journey saying, you've done some of our business programs, the world's going to need healers. Why don't, please join. I was like, all right, like this is clearly a sign. So I stepped into that. And that was really the stepping into this embodied and somatic space and shifting out of the cognitive mind. And on the second day of that training, I discovered I could channel. Didn't know anything about channeling. But this time we literally had art imitating life, if you like, because I ended up coaching that person that I saw in my journey in reality, in some shape or form, in his own training. And that's when I realized, okay, there's something you can do with energy here, which is profound. And then, over this last few years, I've just developed my own modality. It shifted from working with energy with my hands to be able to step into like an expression of this diaphragmatic breaths, which would come through. And these breaths would lead to like physical pain releasing from people's body. It would lead to like people like past lives would come through and they'd heal those. They would be able to help create what they want with speed. And so at that point, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like what more could I even anticipate? But what happened next was I did an unusual experience with someone, and a kind of clearing happened in my throat chakra. And the next time I worked with clients, these sound frequencies activated within me. And I just allowed myself to go with it and not really knowing. I think essentially like the sound is just the continuation of the breath. So if imagine like these breaths are coming through from the mouth, then these tones start to come through, which just opened up this entirely different field. And I saw it as sort of like just an upgrading of the architecture. And after a month of kind of questioning, do I stick with what I'm already doing or do I twist? I decided to twist, and it was the best decision I've ever made in terms of what it's allowed. And I can tell you more about that in a minute, but that's really what became what is now known as Neuro-Resonance Optimisation. It's gone through many iterations in terms of it, but it was this initial opening around sound, which I didn't have a cognitive understanding of. I didn't have any expertise around sound, but something got reawoken essentially within me, and then I chose to step into it.
Wow, thank you for sharing your journey through all these different pieces. And what I'm hearing is that often we're stuck sort of in this conscious mind in our heads, and we try to think or reason our way into or out of things and try to fix whatever we think is broken. And I love that you took that step sort of into the unknown, the uncertainty a bit with your journey as well. And just letting that open up and expand and bring in all the different layers, the subconscious, everything, maybe even the collective consciousness that is out there. And you let that all become part of the journey. This is amazing and absolutely incredible what flows from that, what comes from that. I'm always surprised at the things that people share that happen when we are willing to just open up and let go and really just become part of that universal flow. So discovering that you can channel, discovering the frequencies, this is absolutely amazing. How would you share this with listeners who are maybe in a place similar that you were in 2017, and they're not sure how to move forward or how to come out of this space that they might be stuck in as you were unhappy or unhealthy or unwell? What are some of the first pieces or steps that they can take to start out of that space, start moving out of that space?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would say is really starting to listen to the body, because we know more and more about how the body keeps the score, but the subtle nuances of what that truly looks like are really extraordinary, right? Like if I'm working with someone and there's a pain in their neck and they can't move their neck, there's going to be something where that energy doesn't just start with the pain in the neck at that moment in time, right? You could trace it through time. There's probably a familiarity with the patterning of what you're experiencing, even if it's not in the exact form. Even if you never experienced that kind of stuckness, there are other times where something felt stuck. So if you start to trace the lineage of where that came from, your body's going to start to tell you something. Oh, like, where's the first time I felt stuck? Oh, okay, maybe what's happening here is somehow related to that, where that didn't get fully processed in that moment. And if I can trace back and even journal on or audio journal on what was actually might be behind this, it might start to reveal something even deeper. And if I start to notice that the tension's expanding even more, I want to just breathe into it. I want to really allow it. I want to allow myself to honor it. Because what happens with energy is if you want it to be otherwise, it will find ways to persist, right? The more we experience exactly what's there as it is, the more it creates the opportunity for the energy to transmute, because the energy doesn't die. It only comes into a different form. So the question is, what form do you want it to take? Well, just like you wanting to be seen and heard and acknowledged, which is kind of the core of the human experience, these energies want to be experienced. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be acknowledged. And so imagine these energies as different parts of you which wanting to be integrated within you. And when there is a lack of integration, that's when we're experiencing more of these experiences of anxiety or depression or suicidal ideation or traumas or what have you, right? There are so many different aspects of what this can look like. So if we can start to trace, where does this actually come from? What if this wasn't actually about right now, but there's something much deeper which is going on, which could really get to the source of where this is coming from? That level of curiosity is going to be a great starting point. But then from there, you want to look for who can support you with that, right? Who do I resonate with to be able to step into creating that level of support? So I don't try and do this on my own, because that's what's going to then create the opportunity to not just experience and understand it, but to go beyond it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you found that support as well when you went on your own journey with someone you trusted, you said. So I feel that support is a vital part of stepping out of this uncomfortable space that we might be in, or the space where we feel unwell, or as you said, have mental health challenges. So moving forward from that. And how does frequency and resonance fold into that experience? I know you touched on the Neuro-Resonance Optimisation, so maybe you want to share a little bit more about what that looks like for listeners who may have never heard of that before or might not be familiar with it. How does frequency now come into this healing journey that you're on?
Yeah, so it's quite simple, really. So think about everything in life has a frequency. This phone that was recording on, this desk where the phone is on, everything has its own frequency. Everything within you also has a frequency. And the question is the frequency at a level where there is any disresonance, any distortion? Or is that a frequency where everything is flowing, where there is pure ease? And you're going to know, right? So whenever you're feeling tension within the body, which you're not actually choosing to experience, like there might be muscle tension because you're in an activated state from a workout, no problem. But whenever you're experiencing tension which is not desired, There's something potentially that wants to be looked at. There might potentially be distortion in the field. There might be some impurity that wants to be experienced so that it can transmute and come back into a space of ease and flow. So that's really what we're looking at. We're looking at the subtle energies within your cells, which are being experienced and taking shape in the form of breath being contracted, shoulders being heavy, throat being constricted, hot flushing on the face, my eyes are, blowing up or inflamed, like whatever the subtle nuances that are going on in your body, this is what we're looking at. And what we want to do is we want to recalibrate this. So the way to do this is to be able to tune in to what that energy's emotion is behind that. So for instance, if there's tension in the throat, what's the emotion that's there around it? Well, it could be a combination. It could be that one feels anger. It could be that also underneath the anger is a sadness. So what I'm doing when I'm working with these frequencies with people is I'm looking to tune in to what is the sound that corresponds with the tension that is being felt within the body. And if they say, okay, it feels like sadness, or it feels like anger, great. Then we're going to look at, when does it come from? Does it come from something within your lifetime, or does it actually feel even older than you? Because that also gives us a subtle information around what kind of tone is going to support it. Now, sometimes people don't know. How would I even know? They might say, perfect, no problem. That's my role, right? My role is to guide and to channel through what are the frequencies that are going to match onto your experience. And so then I will just tune my voice in to allowing you to experience exactly what's there for you through these vocal tones, right? We bring resonance where there is dysresonance. So we're creating a space for everything which is there to be honored, acknowledged, and then to transmute. And then once that energy starts to transmute, more space will start to open up within the cells in the body. So you might feel more relaxation. Sometimes people's like jaw that is just wide open because there's so much relaxation. They're in this space of surrender. And if we take this a little bit deeper, when I've talked to neuroscientists about how they'd understand this work, they said to me this. So what's actually happening is that what these frequencies are doing is they're bypassing the cognitive mind. So once we bypass the cognitive mind, we're hitting the emotional centers of the brain. And then from hitting the emotional centers of the brain, we're connecting in with the autonomic nervous system. So we're building a lot of safety within the places where you haven't felt safe before. Because if you build that foundation of safety, that's when you can create anything. But if you haven't got a foundation of safety, it's very difficult to receive because it's not safe to receive. It's not safe to have love because it's not been safe before, right? So this is the foundation, and then you build from there. And then the final aspect is the space of bypassing the cortical, which creates the surrender. And when you create that surrender, it's this deep state, right, where we take ourselves out of a mind state and we go beyond. We go into more like unified fields of consciousness where everything is distilled and we can create anything from that space. So I'm really guiding people through a journey through these different tensions, through these different beliefs, fears, concerns, subconscious patterning that lies within their cells, transmuting the energy so it no longer feels like it's within the cells, and then activating the version of them that wants to be remembered.
This is really fascinating because very often when we're dealing with trauma or stress or these kind of experiences, we believe it's a mental thing. We just have to be tougher. We just have to change our mindset, use some hacks or do something. But really it is a biological issue that happens and a neurological issue that happens in our body that we have to work with on that level, and the energies and frequencies that go with that as well. So I feel like when we address this just from one point of we need to do mental work or we need to do emotional work, we're not getting that full picture that actually resolves these energies and these states. So this is absolutely fascinating to bring all these pieces in. And how does this work compare with, I know, for example, myself, I spent a lot of time in therapy, probably the better part of a decade, which was very long and very often re-traumatizing because I had to keep talking about the things that happened before. How does this compare with what the work that you're doing? I feel that you have a very different approach to that actually works different in a sense like that with clients.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's really important that we're not taking people through a space where they're in a re-traumatization, but it's quite subtle, right? So we don't need to go into a lot of story to be able to actually heal or clear what's there. All we need to do is to experience as it is. So, say that, for instance, I'm working with someone around sexual abuse, which I've done many, many times. And usually by the time that they've come to me, they've done so much work around that. And I'll always ask them before we even set that container, if something shows up around this, are you willing to look at that, right? And they'll always say yes, because they've got so much courage and they've already done so much in the healing journey. And so I don't try and take them into a detailed story of what happened. I literally ask them just to experience what's there around it, because their body already knows. They don't need me to go into details. I don't need to go into this happened with this person and this led to. They'll tell me what they want to tell me. And then all I'll invite them to do is experience what's there. Sometimes it even happens in spaces where that wasn't the intention. And I'll ask, are you good to go there, right? But all we're doing is we're allowing the body to show us what's there and honoring that. And then often with something like, abuse, what the foundation is going to be is building safety, because that body is not safe, right? The safety has been violated, so we need to create that safety. So the tones that I'm going to bring through are much sweeter. They're much, they're almost like a childlike. There's an innocence to them. They'll build that sense of okay. And it's a process to be able to take them through to build that safety within their nervous system, to rewire them in that moment, right? To the belief systems to start to shift, where the negative thought patterns are starting to dissolve around that just by honoring what's there. So that's quite a distinct approach than, I guess, a more therapeutic approach, because it's not about the talking. It's actually, we want to go beyond words. We want to go into the body, where the body is truly going to show you what it needs from you to be able to come back into a space of calibration, and then from a space of calibration into this deepest level of wisdom that's waiting to be remembered.
Yeah, it sounds like a very safe space that you're creating, and something very empowering for your clients as well, as they're working through these challenges and finding sort of that. I feel like the answers have been within them all along. This capacity to change and to heal and to build resilience has been there all along. So this must be a very empowering feeling also for people who experience this. And I'm wondering, how do we sit with time in this whole thing? I feel like time doesn't really apply so much when we talk about energy work, when we talk about frequency work. It's very different than when we're in this reality here today, where we say, okay, it's 2 p.m. now, and I have a 1-hour session now, and maybe in 2, 3, 5, 10 weeks, I might see some results. How do we look at time when it comes to the kind of work that you are doing?
Sure. So the philosophy that I've created is around the collapsing of time. So, often I'm working with leaders who've got very big visions for humanity. And, the version of them that's in front of me when they start isn't capable of fulfilling that vision, right? Just complete straightness. And if they were, it wasn't going to happen necessarily in the timeline that they wanted, or it's not going to necessarily happen in the timeline of this lifetime. So we want to experience everything that's there, which is in the way of that person being able to be right now the person who can fulfill this. Now, there's going to be iterations over time of what that's going to look like as they step into bigger games. That's going to expand in terms of what it's going to require of them. So it's not like a one and done. We're not trying to fix anything. We're actually just bringing them to a space to continually see their own wisdom from this, not just an intellectual standpoint, but from a cellular experience, right? There's a resonance that comes through. Their voice changes. Their way of seeing the world, the way of seeing opportunities starts to unravel in the way that it was before. The problems dissolve from this space. So with the collapsing of time, the way I'm thinking around it is essentially you're looking to experience the fears, the recurring thoughts, the concerns that are there, so that you move through one, you move through another, and it creates a stacking effect, almost like compound interest. If you just looked at one piece, well, that's going to be somewhat, helpful. But if you look at 10, 15 pieces, then all of that is creating this impact of more and more expansion. You go into tension to create more light. You go into tension to create more light. And so eventually there's this activation that's happening within your cells. And then we activate the version of you that wants to come through. And we keep doing that, right? And we keep connecting you in with what it is you want to experience, what you want to create. We even connect you with the version of you that's already experienced it. Because if time doesn't actually exist in the way that we think it is, we don't just have to go backwards in time, we can also go forwards. So what I often do with leaders is I'll be able to take them into a space where they've already experienced what they wanted to create. And then from there, we'll ground that in, because if you bring a tone in which is at a high vibration, that's great. That's really connecting with the frequency of love. It connects you in with this universal intelligence. But if you stay only there, it's going to more likely diminish the ability to receive, because we also want frequency to be grounded. So there's a lot of stuff where people can be floating up in the clouds and they seem like they should be loving life, but deep down, they're not grounded. So their ability to receive is not as deeply embedded, right? Other people, they're really grounded, but they can't actually connect in with the higher self. So there's a disconnect. So what we want to do is we want to connect you with the higher self, but we also want to ground you so you can really connect in and receive what you want from material reality. And so what I'm doing is I'm really connecting these two threads together so that these parts can really integrate and the deepest wisdom can come through, but also the ability to bring it forth in reality also gets to come through simultaneously. So that's one aspect, I guess, around the collapsing of time, right? Where timelines dissolve. One of my clients said, Sam, you don't, collapse hours into days, you collapse generations into hours, right? And so that's become kind of like a commitment in terms of the way that I look at the work that we can do for people. If they're the right kind of person that comes to me, this is what my intention is going to be, is to be able to literally collapse generations into hours. So not just experiencing what's been there in your lifetime, but experiencing what's been there ancestrally. And you might not even be aware of that, but that's okay. That's my role, is to be able to support people into that space.
I think it opens up so many possibilities for leaders and also just for listeners on the podcast to take a real look at and maybe even think about a little bit what's in their lives that could be changed and affected by working on a modality as you have developed with you. And actually, when they have these big goals and visions, and we sometimes put this off as legacy, I'll create this before I die, or maybe I want to leave this for my children and grandchildren. But part of it, I think, is the beauty of being able to actually experience that in this lifetime. I mean, that's why we're here, and that's part of the healing too. So when you're collapsing these generations into hours, you're essentially also giving that possibility of having these experiences now in this lifetime with this body that we have here. So this is absolutely amazing and opens up so many possibilities, not just for healing, but in the work that we want to do and how we want to connect, globally, locally, in the visions that we have. So yeah, wonderful. And tell us a little bit about, I know that you've recently developed an app also, and how can listeners dive into this world that you are offering, this healing space with the resonance, the frequencies? How can they connect with that through this project that you have going now?
Sure. So let me tell you a little bit about the vision of this. So the platform is called Resonance OS, and what this is doing at a foundational level is building that safety, what we call inner resonance. And so it's going to build safety and trust within 8 to 9 minutes a day. And then as people get ready to go deeper, then we can go into this space called unlock flow. And that can be used not just for things like flow state, but it can be used for sleep. I have clients who would use this to help them go to sleep at night. They would used to and this is before I'd even created this app. And this is what allowed me to see all these different use cases, was people I just fall asleep listening to this activation. So, okay, interesting, right? But then if someone's dealing with grief, you could also have experiences whereby going into this journey with an intention, because the intention is what informs what you experience. So one of the important things I probably haven't shared around Neuro-Resonance is that we're guiding you with intention. So in the case of the app, what's happening is you're setting an intention of what you want to experience. And then as you're listening to the activation, I'm inviting you to experience what's there, which is in the way of that intention already being fulfilled. And then taking you on a journey through these frequencies to be able to come back into more recalibration. So it's more easily attainable, the intention that you had at the beginning, right? Within these short periods of time. So you could listen to the same activation daily and have a different experience each time. For instance, for myself, when I listen to Unlock Flow, what happens, I'd say like 95% of the time, is there'll be a watering in my eyes and there'll be something which is releasing. And I don't even know what is releasing, but there's just something which is released. And there's this opening and there's more expanse in my own energy. So as a baseline, what's happening is people come to a space of peace, renewal. But then when people go even deeper, sometimes it's literally gone like, oh my God, I got a message from someone who listened to this on a plane from Australia and they said, you don't understand what you've just done. I'd gone through so much grief after, almost losing my life on multiple occasions over the last few years. And this healed that. And I am now altering my name to step into this new version of me. And then I got the next message was, Notre Dame is resurrected, and apparently so am I. And I was gobsmacked because I had no idea at that time that it was going to be that potent, what I'd created just by putting out, like, my intention is that this is going to impact collective consciousness. And that intention, in the same way that the intention is driving what you experience, the sound frequency, that intention of impacting the collective made it be so, right? And so what we're doing is we're creating this space for anyone to be able to come into a space of coherence on a daily basis, to come into this flow state, to come into their own wisdom and trust without needing to go and do years of therapy to figure out these insights. No, let the body show you and let the intensity be a guide of what readiness stage you are at, right? For some people, the inner resonance is where they're going to want to sit for a little while because that's going to build the safety. For others, they're going to go, I want to go straight into the deepest activation of my peak performance, and they're going to go into Unlock Flow. And that's just the foundation of what we're building with this platform. What's going to happen is that over time, the game is to how can we transmute every challenge of the human condition? How can we create a space to move from self to systemic? So we look at all the different challenges that we deal with as human beings, and we create activations which are going to support people with that. Then we move to what does it look like to create that in organizations? And we create something which is going to support organizations, whether it's a customized approach or whether it's something else that will be decided with time. Then we look at what would it look like to create this within the family dynamic, given that there is lack of coherence in families. How could we actually build that in, create systems which are going to allow people to listen together to activations, to be able to come into harmony within the family unit? And then we look at what would it look like in societal systems, right? Going back to politics, going back to law, finance, all these spaces where there is disresonance in the field, where there's fear and scarcity at the driving point or the foundation of how they operate. How can we lift that frequency so that the distortion that determines what those organizations, those systems look like starts to actually disappear and new systems emerge naturally? So this is really what I'm aiming to create.
It makes me think a little bit of how can we prepare ourselves for that? Because you mentioned that, some of the clients that you work with, they're not quite ready yet to step into that future self that they're seeing themselves in or what they want to accomplish. So how can listeners get ready for this change that we are working on, that we're affecting on this global level? And I believe a lot of the practitioners who are in a healing space, who are in building this coherence and connecting with other global practitioners, we're all working towards that same goal of affecting these systemic changes. So how can our listeners start preparing on their own individual level for these kind of changes, to be receptive, to be open, to maybe let go of some of that fear or that uncertainty that they're feeling, especially in the times today where the world is, a little bit upside down? What can they do? They can access your app. They can start working with that. What things would you suggest where they start this change?
Honestly, I feel like that inner resonance is a foundation that most people are able to cope with, because there are sounds which, and I'll preface this that the app is designed for adults. It's not being tested on children, and anything which you do with kids, I believe you've really got to create a permission system and agreement with them. If you just put something on them, without them actually understanding what it is or buying into it, then it's more likely to be rejected. So you've got to be a different kind of approach. Whereas adults, they can choose. I resonate with this. This feels something I want to experience. They can test it out. The beauty of the app is they can test it for 3 days, and then at the end they can choose whether or not they want to continue. Right, and that's what we've designed it. Is so it's the approach is showing, not telling you. I want you to experience this for yourself, and then let your body show you, do you want to keep doing this, or do you want to go find something else? No problem. It's really just listening from within, which is actually some of what I share about in Inner Resonance, is listening from within to see what's now for you, right? And whatever now is for you, truly looking at how can you honor that, right? Because there are so many stages within our journey. The version of me that was in 2017 didn't like himself, didn't really think about much beyond himself. He was just looking at finished PhD. I will be happy or satisfied when I do that. That was how life looked. The version of me in 2013, 2014 was, imposter syndrome, dealing with grief of a friend who had passed away, and continued to be on that grief journey for 5 years until I really decided to discover what was at the source of it, right? So whatever version you're at, honor it, create space to allow it, but honestly, bring resonance into this. It just shortcuts the pain of going through that on your own. It shortcuts the therapeutic methods, and don't want to be dismissive of therapy, because therapy has been great for lots of people. But if people want to go with speed while creating safety simultaneously, this is what Resonance OS is for. It's to be able to really create that space for you to come back to your own innate wisdom with speed while also feeling safe to do so.
Amazing. And thank you for sharing this work with our listeners and making this available for them to experience this in their own lives and with their own challenges. And if our listeners are very curious now, of course, we're going to put all of your offerings in the show notes as well. But how can our listeners connect with you? Do you offer any programs or services outside of the app? How can they dip their toes into understanding more about this, learning more about it, and working with it as well?
Sure. So I work with a few leaders, at a time. And basically the leaders that I work with have these extraordinary missions for humanity. And, we're really in this co-creation of what is going to really make the biggest difference for humanity. So when someone has a vision where it's looking to impact millions or billions of people, then they usually come to me to be able to support them in the financial expansion, in the capacity to lead from that space, to be the expression of love, which is actually going to allow the vibration that needs to come through for the vision to be fulfilled. That's where I'm going to come in. If someone is just more at an early stage of their journey, I'm not going to be the person who's going to necessarily work with them at a private level. Sometimes I do events where I'm facilitating around the world. The next one, I don't know when this one will be recorded, but I think I've got something in November in Bali. But by the time this might be out there, that event might be gone. So the simplest answer is to go to my website, which is soulpurposeleaders.com. And you'll be able to find out, whatever different offerings we have by the time this is released at that stage, what different events and things we might have going on. You'll also have the link to resonanceos.ai in the chat, where you'll be able to really experience that. And that's where I'd invite anyone who's listening who feels a calling to start. That's going to be a place which is going to allow you to sense in to what's going to support you on your journey, right? And then beyond that, I'm on social media. You can find me, Sam Kukathas, on, I think, Instagram and Facebook, and then Soul Purpose Leaders on LinkedIn. And But those are the simple ways that I would say.
Amazing. That's given us lots of resources and our listeners lots of connection points to learn more about this. And if you are a leader with a global vision and you're looking to step into the next version of yourself and looking for that support, this might be a good place for you to start as well. And of course, we will be linking to all of Sam's offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there on how you can connect with him, how you can find out about the programs, the events, connect with the app if you'd like to try that out. And we'll make sure we have all that ready for you. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing this space and your vision, your journey with our listeners and with myself. It has been an absolute honor to have you here today. And I feel this work is so important in moving forward this global healing that we are all trying to support and trying to affect, and in connection with each other. I feel this will be sort of a grassroots movement that will make a change globally. So thank you for being part of that. And thank you for this amazing work that you do.
Thank you so much, Petra. It's been an absolute joy to be here. And thank you for all the work you're doing to help facilitate this future.
Yeah, each of us in our own way, however, we feel called to do that. Take really good care of yourself, Sam. And thanks for joining me today.
I will. You too.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.